Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for today's session on Wellness Wednesday. We have Emma Kain, who coordinates a lot of the volunteerism at the United Way of Wapello County and is also finishing her her master's degree in social work. So she's got a lot of great ideas on how to keep us mentally well during this time. So Emma, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I think I know all of you, which is exciting. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I've just got a couple of slides to kind of help me guide what I'm talking about more than anything. So if you could just let me know if you see those. Looks good? All right. So I was really excited when Holly reached out because I've personally been going through this process of figuring out what my actions are in terms of self-care or self-soothe and what's actually serving me moving forward. And so I'm really excited to go through that today with y'all and kind of get your thoughts as well. So the first thing that I would like to do is kind of walk us through a centering exercise. So as much as you're comfortable, and you can turn your cameras off to do this if you would like, I'm going to invite you to close your eyes and get comfortable. Maybe place your feet flat against the floor, whatever feels good to you. And we're just going to go through a quick scan of our bodies to try and find where our areas of tightness, stress, and tension are. And so I'll invite you to just go through this process with me. So first we're going to start at the top of our head and just slowly feel for tightness. Maybe you do some stretches, and we'll go into our jaw and then into our neck, feeling for tightness, our shoulders, our arms, our elbows, our wrists, our hands, and our fingers. Move into the upper back and the lower back, into our hips and into our thighs, our knees, our calves, our ankles, our feet, and our toes. So when you found that tension, I'm going to invite you to take a big breath in and imagine, as you're doing this, a healing, soothing light entering your body through your nose, and it's flowing to those areas of your body where you found tension and tightness. Let that light fill you up and seep into your cells. We're going to take a few more deep breaths. And on that last one, when we exhale, we're going to imagine that light leaving our bodies and taking away that tension so that we can be centered and ready for the rest of our session and for the rest of our day. So when you're ready, I'll invite you to open up your eyes, turn your cameras back on if you would like. And so that took about 3 minutes. And I think for me, it's a really easy way and quick way to like check in with myself because our emotions have a physical toll on our bodies. And I know for me, I carry my stress like in my neck and in my shoulders. And so every once in a while, I just have to do one of these to kind of get that out. And so as we kind of go through this, if you need to check in at any time throughout this, feel free to do that, or feel free to do it throughout your day. And so like I said earlier, we're going to talk about the difference between self-care and self-soothing, and ultimately how that leads to us setting boundaries between our work and our home life. So what is self-care? That's kind of like the question that we have to answer first. And I think the term gets batted around a lot, and it's definitely been heavily commercialized. We see articles and advertisements all of the time about the candles and the bath bombs and the creams and appliances, that if we just bought that one item, our self-care would be perfect and we would be 100%. But I question if that's actually self-care. Do these things actually help us take care of our bodies and of our minds? And for some people, that answer might be yes. Maybe the best way for you to relax is to take a moment for yourself in a bath, or maybe smelling a really good candle, kind of helps you stay in that moment. And that's wonderful and that's valid if that's true for you. However, I think for a lot of us, and myself included, those things are not a part of my self-care. And so thinking about what self-care is, picture yourself as a glass, right? And the level of water in your glass is the amount of energy, whether it be emotional, physical, spiritual, mental, that we have to give to others. And so if we're only taking care of or giving to others, meaning we're pouring our water into their glass, we're going to run out really quickly. If we don't take the time to keep filling up our glass through self-care, we can't be there for our loved ones or ourselves. And even more, if we're not taking the responsibility of filling up our own glass, we can start to unconsciously rely on others to fill it for us. And so, that leads to unhealthy relationships and outcomes that we may not like. And, it's really the same idea as when you're flying and the oxygen masks come down, and you have to put yours on first so that you can help others. We're no good to people if our glasses aren't kept refilled, or if we don't have enough oxygen and we pass out. We're not able to help ourselves or others in that instance. Which brings us to what is self-soothing. And for me, this phrase, I only heard it about a couple months ago. It was the first time that this idea was verbalized to me. And so, again, the refrain of this whole thing is kind of, it depends on the person, and what's right for you isn't necessarily right for the next person. So with that in mind, I think we're all probably pretty guilty of calling self-soothing behavior self-care. I know I am. And so none of these things that are listed on the screen are, bad in and of themselves, right? It's just those things can't be the only way that we're taking care of ourselves, because in the long run, it means we're not actually taking care of us at all. So like on the screen, some examples could be shopping, alcohol, overeating, overnapping, binging TV and Netflix. I'm super guilty of that one. And, just spending hours scrolling on our phones through the various apps that absorb our attention. And so what's really interesting to me when I learned about this, it really goes down to our brain chemistry and the way our brains are wired. So these self-soothing patterns, it stems from pleasure that reinforces the habits that get hardwired into our brain. So it's literally changing the way we think and we perceive the world. And that means we can do these things without even knowing it, because it tends to happen when we feel triggered by feelings of discomfort or stress. And so without even knowing it, if I start feeling stressed, I might just veg on the couch and watch a lot of Netflix, but that's not actually helping me resolve the stressful situation that I find myself in. And thinking back to the brain, it becomes our go-to because our amygdala, the lower part of the brain, knows that it's going to provide release, at least for a short time. Going shopping, it's going to release some endorphins, and we're going to feel better for that short amount of time. And it's the amygdala that is responsible for detecting fear and preparing for emergencies. And so as soon as our brain starts to sense danger or stress, again, often before we consciously do, we spring into those self-soothing behaviors to keep that stress at bay. And so I think before I was cognizant of the difference between self-care and self-soothing, I was calling a whole lot of self-soothing self-care. But was because of those patterns that I had become accustomed to that began to get hardwired into my brain. So with that in mind, how do we practice self-care? If we want to make sure we're not self-soothing and we want to actually practice self-care. It's more about the intention versus the action. So again, like I said, some of those self-soothing behaviors can be self-care, but it's about what are we intending from this activity, or is there an action that will serve us, or is it ultimately doing us more harm than good? Obviously, vegging out on the couch for hours, not actually helping me. Helping my pop culture knowledge maybe, but not my body. And so when we're seeking actual self-care, what we're really doing is seeking self-respect. We're respecting our lived experience and the fact that we deserve to take care of ourselves. This also takes self-discipline, self-connection, being in tune with ourselves and what's going on with our bodies and the way we're feeling, and sometimes a realignment of our actions and thought patterns, which takes a lot of work. But none of this to say that self-care can't be fun, right? And none of this is to say that self-care can't provide comfort, because those two things absolutely have to happen. Things like baths or grabbing a drink with a friend are absolutely self-care. And it's just about why we're doing those things. Is it to escape or is it to fulfill a need? Because physical comfort and socialization and joy are necessities of the human experience. We need those things. And one more note that I want to make is that it's the practice of self-care, right? So none of us start out being amazing at self-care, and none of us practice amazing self-care all of the time. It comes and goes based on where we are in our lives. And like I said, it takes work, and sometimes we're just not at the point where we can put that work in, and we need to honor that as well. So some ideas that aren't bath bombs and lotions for how we could take care of ourselves. Drinking water, drinking enough water. For me, one of my practices is, I think, a Diet Coke would be good right now. I drink a glass of water first to see if I'm actually just thirsty. Being creative, getting enough sleep, going for a walk. One of my favorites is spending a few minutes in the morning just quietly to get my head on straight for the day. I'm not looking at my phone. I'm not doing anything. I'm just like prepping myself for the day. A friend told me that her self-care practice was going to the bathroom when she needed to, which was pretty revolutionary for me, because I think, sometimes we honestly just hold it to get through a task. And it's like, no, I'm going to honor the needs of my body, and I'm going to go to the bathroom when I need to go to the bathroom. And, just spending time with loved ones and finding something that you enjoy doing. Those are things that we need to do to take care of ourselves. And ultimately, and important for right now, with a lot of us working from home, is trying to set work and home boundaries. And it's easier said than done. And I know before this, I was guilty of bringing work home with me, and I'm sure a lot of us were as well. But it's really important for us to set those boundaries so that we can take care of our professional obligations, which in turn allows us to take care of the responsibilities we have in our personal lives. So when we set these boundaries, it's easier for us to take care of ourselves and to take care of others. So again, we can keep our glass as full as possible. So boundaries. Again, it's about finding what works best for you. If these things, you're like, Emma, that's a horrible idea, that's okay. But these are just some ideas that work for me and work for folks that I know. So maintaining a fixed start and end time for work. Honestly, my day starts a little later now that I'm working from home, and it goes a little later into the evening. But honoring those times so that it's not just this fluid mishmash of personal and home as much as possible. Keeping a policy of when you're going to return emails and phone calls and texts. Is it 9 to 5? And if you get an email, you know, at 7 o'clock and it's not an emergency, you can wait till the morning to return that email or that phone call. Keeping a lunchtime. You know, we all know that breaks are really important. And so we need to honor our needs by making sure we're eating and letting our minds rest a little bit before diving back into whatever project we may be working on. And some practices that can help folks do all of this, actually getting dressed for the day, or moving from one pair of sweatpants to another pair of sweatpants, just to kind of mark where your days are. You know, establishing that work environment in your home. My home office has definitely changed since bringing all of my stuff with me. And so, you know, I've got my work zone, and this is where I get my work done. You know, taking breaks and going outside, not watching TV while we're working. It's, for me, pretty easy now that I'm home, but trying not to do that. And a friend said that she was maintaining her commute. And so when she would drive to work, it would be about 20 minutes for her to get to work. And that time was really important to her because it helped her, you know, get her brain into work mode or into home mode. And so now, before she starts working, she takes a 20-minute walk just to keep that time and to keep things separate for her. And then when the day's over, she takes another 20-minute walk. But ultimately, you know, you're the expert on your needs and what works for you. So it's all about trial and error until we find those things that work best. And so we're not going to do this right now, but at some point today or when you have time, I invite you to turn on some relaxing music, again, whatever that is for you. Classical music makes me more tense. I don't know why. It's not relaxing for me. And so instead, what I do is I turn on instrumental R&B or rap tracks. So just the music, no words. And that is relaxing background noise for me. And so that's what I do. But, you know, just take 10 or so minutes to reflect on your actions. What are you doing that's self-care? What are you doing that's self-soothing? And kind of examine the intentions of your actions and what you're getting out of them at the end. And then also recognizing, you know, if there are any changes that you need to make. And for me, thinking about the changes that I needed to make and still need to make, I am not perfect at this by any means. You know, I got down on myself and was like reprimanding myself, like, gosh, Emma, why did you keep doing that? You knew it wasn't good for you. So I just urge you to forgive yourself for those things that are not serving you. And, you know, don't ruminate, and instead, you know, praise yourself for your current introspection, because, you know, reflecting on the past is important, and that's how we learn, but we can't be stuck there. And so if we make that change, we need to praise ourselves for it. If we slide back, that's okay. We move forward again. Again, it's all about a process. And so I find that exercise helpful. I do it often to check in on myself to see if I'm doing okay. Some days are better than others. And so, you know, I just invite you to take some time for yourself. Again, that's self-care, to just check in on how you're doing. And so with that, that's all I have in terms of slides. So I will stop sharing my screen. And I think Holly, you'll take over so we can go into the next part.
Yeah, so there's so many good things you shared. You probably saw me smiling and laughing on mute because there's just like they hit home. You had a lot of things that just hit home for me today. So yeah, there was the moment of the idea of the commute. So yesterday morning, I had to go early for my groceries. I had to be there at 7 to pick them up. So that's a 20-minute drive to Ottumwa. And I missed that drive. I realized that I had and usually during that drive, at least once or twice a week, I call my dad. And I had missed it and he had missed it. And so I'm like, I need to incorporate that at some next week, like next week I'm gonna do 2 times a week, call him early in the morning. That was our chat time. So that really struck home. And then also the idea that not always is watching TV self-soothing. So for me, I thought about, gosh, that's actually something I do with my son. Like we like to watch certain shows together. So that was a self-care thing for the two of us, that it's kind of our time, it's a kind of our thing, one of our things that we do. So I really liked your perspective on those things. A lot of great information today, Emma. Thank you so much for sharing, and just appreciate your time. So I'm going to shut off the recording and then we'll open it up for questions and comments. Thanks, Emma.